it's me, Elvira, Mistress of the Dark. It's the final night of Animal Planet's Halloween. This is it, the night we've all been waiting for. It's Hollywood's Creepiest Creatures, hosted by, you guessed it, me. When Animal Planet asked me to host Hollywood's Creepiest Creatures, I told them that no one wanted to see a show about agents. But when I learned what creepy creatures they were talking about, werewolves, zombies, monsters, I mean, come on, I dated them all. I knew I was perfect for the job. I didn't know about this jungle, but hey, can't have everything. Oh, enough talk. Here it is, the premiere of my very first Animal Planet special, Hollywood's Creepiest Creatures on Animal Planet's Halloween. Roll it!
They're coming! They're coming!
They're the creepy movie creatures that send shivers down our spines. Beats Gone Bad have delivered some of the biggest scares in Hollywood history.
People don't know what's down inside the water.
I blanched white.
It's really scary stuff.
Oh! So get ready for an all-out attack of paws, claws, and jaws. Darling, it's me, Elvira, Mistress of the Dark. And you're in for a treat, because I'm going to teach you about the birds and the bees. No, darling, not those birds and bees. That's like a whole other show. I'm talking about the kind of psycho birds that'll peck your eyes out, and killer bees that can wipe out an entire city. No cuddly pussycats and smoochy pooches for us. Instead, we're going to meet some truly wild animals, rampaging rats, angry ants, and scary sea monsters. We've got creatures that creep and crawl, howl and growl, slither and snarl. Hey, sounds like a few of my old boyfriends. Anyway, it seems that whenever Hollywood wants to give audiences a good scare, it looks around the animal kingdom for inspiration. Now, what's scary, lurks in the dark, and looks great in black? No, not me, darling. Bats. Now, I know they can be a big pain in the neck sometimes, but bats are my favorite fellow creatures of the night. Hey, oh, hey, what's the hair, buddy? What are you, blind or something? Anyway, like me, bats can be a little creepy at first, but once you get to know them, you'll see they're actually a lot of fun to have around. To the average Joe, probably no creatures bring on a bigger case of the willies than bats. Is it their strange faces, their weird wings, or the odd way they fly across the night sky in search of dinner? Nope. Mostly, it's just that whenever you see them, you think of just one thing: blood-sucking vampires.
Monster movies often deal with creatures that we consider, we and humans consider scary. Personally, in movies, that stuff doesn't really scare me. In real life, I don't want a bat landing on me. They look kind of grotesque, especially when you're in a cave as a kid, exploring it, and you look up and the entire ceiling's filled with them. All you want to do is get out of there.
In reality, we don't have much to be afraid of. Bats are usually small, pretty harmless, and actually kind of cute.
Bats are just another animal. It's not something that has, evil powers or something. I mean, it's flying around in the dark, and people are afraid of things that they don't understand, which is what you'd expect. Their nature is very docile and shy. So they're not the type of animal to go out and aggressively want to attack other animals.
Believe it or not, until they got so closely linked with the world's most famous vampire, Count Dracula, bats had a pretty good public image.
In other parts of the world, For instance, in China, bats are symbols of good luck and good fortune. I have pictures of Victorian scenes, and they would have a bat floating, sort of like we would draw a butterfly today. Just something whimsical and pretty.
Now, vampire bats actually do exist, and they do drink blood, but not usually human blood. They don't live in Transylvania, and so far, no one has ever seen one turn into a human being.
Even to the rest of the bat world, vampire bats are strange and different. Yeah, there's over 1,000 species of bats in the world, and there are only 3 species of vampire bats, and they all live in Latin America. And they have a special adaptation that they only drink blood as their diet. They don't suck it up like through a straw, though. They make a little cut in an animal's skin, and they really do sort of lap up a little bit as it flows out.
Actually, the vampire bat has an anesthetic in its saliva that dulls the pain of the bite. It also helps victims forget there's a little critter on them sucking their blood. But when it comes to bloodsuckers, no real-life vampire bat can top the title character in author Bram Stoker's 1897 novel, Dracula.
In the novel Dracula, the vampire turns not exactly into a bat, but something that's described alternately as kind of a winged lizard or a giant predatory bird.
In fact, Bram Stoker's Dracula was more likely to shapeshift into a werewolf than anything with wings.
We didn't really see the bat as such connected to Dracula until the stage version of the 1920s. It was easier to put a bat on a string than it was to turn Dracula into a werewolf. And ever since, you know, it's been a key moment in most Dracula films.
There's that bat again.
Besides the novel and the play, there have been dozens of movies featuring the creepy count. And everywhere that Dracu went, his bats were sure to go.
I am Dracula.
It's really good to see you.
I bid you welcome.
Beginning with this 1931 classic starring Bela Lugosi, Dracula appeared on screen as a frequent flyer who became a bat when he had to get out of a tight spot, or into a lady's bedroom.
No, Master. I wasn't going to say anything. I told him nothing. I'm loyal to you, Master.
Physically, the vampire is seen as very charismatic and very mysterious, and thus he has this marvelous cape, which gives him more bat-like qualities because it looks like he's floating or flying, and it's black and dark as night. So the other connection with the bat and the vampire is, of course, the idea that they suck blood, and blood is the life force, so he needs this life force to animate himself. People really, it's also, you know, just a wonderful symbol. We have all pricked our fingers when we were kids and shared blood to become blood brothers. People symbolically drink blood during the Catholic Mass. So drinking blood is not that foreign of an idea, although you don't really want a bat or some animal on your body doing it. But a hunky man, that's okay. For me, anyway.
In bat and human form, Dracula has enjoyed eternal life on the screen, appearing in everything from Son of Dracula to Bram Stoker's Dracula, directed by Francis Ford Coppola. In the 2004 blockbuster Van Helsing, Count Dracula's demon spawn emerge out of their hatchery and drive this Eastern European village batty. And on their own, bats have come out from under Dracula's wing in films like The Vampire Bat, The Bat, Nightwing, and the 1999 movie, you guessed it, Bat.
One of my favorite, bat films is The Devil Bat, starring Bela Lugosi as a scientist who's been betrayed by his business partners, and he takes his revenge by breeding these gigantic blood-sucking bats that are attracted by a cologne he has concocted.
You hate this strange oriental fragrance. Now, if you detect a fragrance in the night, and you're fully awake, you will strike to kill.
In the end, Lugosi gets a splash of his own deadly cologne and a taste of his own medicine. It's easy to see why bats, no matter how harmless in real life, just can't outfly their big screen image as killers out for blood. Just ahead on Hollywood's Creepiest Creatures, we've got some squirmin' vermin guaranteed to bug you out. So don't go away, darling.
Hollywood's Creepiest Creatures is brought to you by Pedigree Food for Dogs. Healthy, happy dog for life.
Let's face it, the world around us is literally crawling with bugs. Flies, cockroaches, termites, ants, killer bees, scorpions, and spiders. It's hard to imagine why so many of us could be afraid of something so tiny. But we are, especially when they bring their whole darn family with them. Hey, didn't we meet on the web? If there's one thing you can say about bugs in the movies, it's that they've definitely got legs. From arachnophobia to eight-legged freaks, and from Starship Troopers to Joe's apartment, movie audiences can't get enough of being bugged out. In the 1999 blockbuster, The Mummy, scary scarabs emerge out of an ancient Egyptian tomb to turn this grave robber into a late-night snack. Our fascination with bugs is as old as the Bible itself. Remember the plague of locusts?
Insects are pretty weird. They seem so strange. They seem as close to kind of alien creatures you can get. I think we've all had the experience where there's a spider crawling in a drain someplace, and you put the water on and it goes down, and then a little bit later it comes back up again. Well, that's very scary to us. It's creepy.
Human beings evolved with insects, and from their earliest time, people have always had insects around, whether they were on their food or whether they were on their body or whether they saw them. Insects have always been there. But in modern society, insects tend to be not as positively portrayed, so people don't like them. They don't like them on their body, they don't like them in their house, they don't like them anywhere.
Why are insects so creepy to us? Well, they look pretty different from us for one. And they hang around in such big groups. It's just plain intimidating. But surprisingly, lots of people have good things to say about one of the scariest of our creepy creatures, spiders.
Spiders actually have a lot of positive ideas associated with them, oddly, because I just want to step on them whenever I see them. But it is considered unlucky to kill a spider, and a lot of people will go out of their way to save a spider. If they see a roach, they'll stomp on it. If they see a spider in their house, they'll pick it up carefully on a newspaper and take it outside.
In the movies, though, it's been a different story. During the 1950s, films about giant mutant insects multiplied like giant mutant insects. Movie screens were literally crawling with big bugs. Spiders,
bloodthirsty moon monsters,
grasshoppers, praying mantises.
Nothing in its path was safe.
And even flying moths. You name it. Besides being scary, the giant insects were also a way of showing how people around the world were feeling at the time. The U.S. and Russia had lots of atomic weapons pointed at each other. Fear of the bomb touched people in their homes and their schools, and found its way into their movies, too.
The Air Force is standing by with an atom bomb. You can't drop an atom bomb on Chicago.
Most of the great horror films are really inspired by the period in which they were conceived. The Cold War jitters and the concerns over atomic testing definitely inspired a whole wealth of exciting science fiction and horror films in the 1950s. The first big one out of the gate was Them.
By direction of the President of the United States, stay in your homes. I repeat, stay in your homes. Your personal safety, the safety of the entire city, depends upon your full cooperation with the military authorities.
In the movie Them, they say, the residual atomic radiation left over from the first atomic blast caused these tiny ants to mutate into 9 to 12-foot ants and colonies of thousands that now have decided to go out and eat people.
At the time, people really didn't know much about the atomic bomb and radiation and what kind of effects it could have on people as well as the animal world, insects.
They came from another world to destroy the Earth. It was the giant spider invasion.
Lack of realism didn't keep movie makers from continuing the giant creature feature trend into the 1970s. The giant spider invasion had plenty of in-sex appeal.
The giant spider invasion. There has never been a film like this before.
Bees had a lot of positive associations. In antiquity, they were seen as being messengers to the divine, and we perceive them to have human qualities that we admire. They are hardworking. They have a beautiful sound, a hum that is perceived to be psalms that they're singing to worship God. But I think it's instinctive, really, that we want to stay away from them because they can hurt us and bother us and sting us.
For more than 20 years, scientists have known that a swarm of killer bees has been headed towards the United States.
The Swarm was a regular honey of a movie, and one that had fans of 1970s disaster flicks all abuzz. Hey, all they were saying was, give bees a chance.
Mile by mile, city by city, moves, leaving in its wake a path of destruction.
For God's sake, Crane, when are we going to stop this massacre?
Irwin Allen's The Swarm. It is more than speculation. It is a prediction.
Now, you wouldn't think it looking at this little sugar-slurping cutie, but one of the most terrifying creepy creatures in the movies is the common housefly. In the horror classic The Fly, David Hedison starred as an ambitious, well-meaning scientist who becomes the victim of a tragic mistake.
I can transport matter, anything, at the speed of light perfectly.
I think a lot of actors turned it down, the part, because they didn't like the fact that he had a cloth on his head through a third of the film. Well, finally it was sent to me, and I went crazy for it. I thought it was absolutely marvelous, because it was believable.
Hedison's character, Andre Delambre, tries to send himself through a matter transporter he's invented. But the experiment takes a tragic turn when a housefly gets trapped in the chamber with him. The scientist's atoms get mixed with that of the fly, and Andre comes out as half insect, half man.
It was kind of graphic for the time. The bug creature, the half scientist, half fly, is really pretty repulsive. And that great scene where the woman is screaming from his point of view, his million-eyed point of view, is very enduring.
The fly showed us that fear has a lot to do with size. The littlest housefly can be downright hideous when it's the size of a man.
Here's a Francois!
And a small spider can be downright terrifying if you're the size of a fly.
There's also the horrible scene where the part fly, part human is caught in the spider's web. And to this day, people can still hear and identify with that little plaintive, "Help me!"
In 1986, director David Cronenberg remade The Fly with Jeff Goldblum playing the scientist and Gina Davis as a reporter covering his discovery.
I liked scary movies when I was a kid, and I still like to have a good scare. But it's not like I've continued to seek out monster movies, and I certainly didn't think, oh, I'm going to do monster movies and stuff like that. But, you know, when The Fly came around and I read that, and I said that's for me, you know. I loved that movie.
Goldblum's Fly would be very different from the 1958 version. Instead of donning a hairy helmet and a fuzzy fly glove, he would slowly transform, as if he were coming down with a disease.
I know an old lady who swallowed a fly. Perhaps she'll die.
Eventually, he would take on fly-like characteristics, walking on the ceiling, jerky movements, and a nasty habit of always throwing up. In the climactic scene, Goldblum completes his transformation into a horrific fly man.
No! 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 Oh, God.
Whether it's atomic beasts or creepy insect people, it seems we just can't get enough of bugs. Good thing, because there sure are plenty of them around. Coming up, Hollywood's creepiest creatures will be going to the dogs. Mad dogs, that is. We're gonna sink our teeth into werewolves and other carnivorous canines. So don't go away, darling.
Hollywood's Creepiest Creatures is brought to you by Toys R Us, because the only thing better than seeing joy on a child's face is no...
You know, canines have been... Quiet, Poopsie. Quiet. Stop. She always gets this way when she gets hungry. You know, canines have been making a nuisance of themselves in Hollywood since the earliest days of the movies. Apparently, viewers just can't get enough of evil, snarling beasts with sharp fangs and a taste for blood. Ooh, that reminds me. I gotta call my agent. DRACULA? There's nothing scarier than seeing man's best friend turn into man's best fiend. Dogs are our cuddliest, most loyal companions. They slobber on our faces, fetch our slippers, and warn us when there's danger approaching. They're the last animals we'd expect to attack us. And that's why Dogs Gone Wild really wig us out.
Dogs were domesticated between 10 and 20,000 years ago in various parts of the world. So certainly human beings have been close to dogs and perceive dogs to have specific kinds of attributes. They're loyal. They're friendly. However, dogs have also, in mythology, come to be associated with the underworld. In Egypt, the god of the dead, Anubis, is dog-headed. In Greek mythology, you have a dog with 3 heads guarding the entrance to Hades. And so, somehow, even though it's friendly and loyal, the dog has been associated with death.
Rabies may have a lot to do with some of our irrational fears about animals. And I think this brings out that idea about the animal being able to infect a human being with a illness involving biting and death.
The Omen is an excellent example of a manifestation of a human or a demon into a dog character. It's very clear from the moment we see the dog that this dog is the embodiment of Satan.
One of the most popular Shaggy Dog stories in the movies is The Hound of the Baskervilles, the Sherlock Holmes mystery about a family's ancient curse.
Know then the legend of the Hound of the Baskervilles. Take heed, and beware the moor in those dark hours when evil is exalted, else you will surely meet the Hound of Hell, the Hound of the Baskervilles.
It's very ironic that the wolf and the dog are such close cousins, and yet in folklore and mythology, one is good and one is evil.
Who's afraid of the big bad wolf? Pretty much everyone. Wolves can be pretty intimidating, but like a lot of wild animals, if we just left them alone, we'd have nothing to worry about. In fact, there's a lot to admire about them. They're very social and extremely devoted to their families. There's a lot of things they like to chow down on, but human beings aren't one of them. Probably the thing that's gotten us most spooked about wolves is the legend of the werewolf.
The werewolf is one of the few totally international monsters. In every culture, in every country, on every continent, there are wolf legends.
The first werewolf story you ever heard was most likely Little Red Riding Hood. But long before that fairy tale about a talking wolf with a taste for humans, werewolves already had a long history. In Greek mythology, Zeus supposedly punished the Arcadian king Lycaos by turning him into a wolf. In the Middle Ages, attacks by rabid wolves reportedly left some victims behaving pretty strangely, which convinced their neighbors that they'd turned into werewolves.
Sometimes it was someone who was perhaps epileptic or schizophrenic or just born looking different, or somebody that the community didn't like. It was perceived that they could perhaps turn into a wolf, and then they were tortured until they admitted that they were indeed werewolves.
Yes, folks' fear of wolves got blown way out of proportion, and some people were even executed after being accused of being werewolves. Now, whether or not they deserve their dangerous reputation, wolves have always been counted on to make hairy Hollywood horror films even hairier. From The Company of Wolves, to Harry Potter, Dark Shadows, to The Munsters, werewolves are all over the place. Now, probably the most enduring werewolf in monster movie history was played by Lon Chaney Jr. In The Wolfman, Chaney is Larry Talbot, a young man turned into a snarling dog man after he's bitten by a werewolf. In human form, Larry is racked with guilt, but he can't keep from turning into a murderous beast when the moon rises.
You wouldn't want to run away with a murderer, would you?
Oh, Larry, you're not. You know you're not.
I killed Bela. I killed Richardson. If I stay around here much longer, you can't tell who's going to be next.
The role of the Wolfman clicked. Built into it was humanity. Here was a man who really didn't want to kill. It was beyond his control.
He's a victim. He doesn't want to be a werewolf. So he's a tragic figure. He has cancer, with the difference that the cancer isn't just killing him, it's killing everybody.
The Wolfman set the tone for werewolf films to come, and even made up fake myths about full moons, silver bullets, and pentagrams that were so realistic, people thought they were actual ancient beliefs. Lon Chaney Jr. went on to star in 4 more Wolfman movies. And over the years, there were countless spin-offs. Jack Nicholson and even Michael J. Fox put on the dog. But long before Fox became a teen wolf, Michael Landon showed 1950s audiences just how rough high school can be in I Was a Teenage Werewolf.
Help me, doctor, please! I know they're going to kiss me, but don't let anyone see me like that. Please, doctor, help me!
Michael Landon in a powerful performance as the boy possessed.
These the official pictures?
Yes, Chief.
Slash on either side of the throat. You got any theories?
Thanks.
I Was a Teenage Werewolf was pretty much rebel without a cause with the werewolf. The makeup on Michael Landon was terrific. It was this really ferocious, scary-looking creature. You know, there wasn't really anything nice about him.
I don't know what the big deal is. Watching your body change in strange ways, growing hair where you don't want it, and having uncontrollable feelings you don't understand? I mean, isn't that what high school is all about?
This high school boy, a teenage werewolf. A constant threat of claw-ripping attack to everyone.
In 1981, 2 of the most popular werewolf flicks of all time hit the screen. The Howling was a traditional hair raiser, while An American Werewolf in London, written and directed by John Landis, combined comedy with the classic chills of a horror film.
American Werewolf in London was actually one of the first cool horror movies. It was the kind of horror movie that didn't take itself too seriously, but at the same time it was really macabre.
Even though he was a big fan of the original Wolfman, Landis wanted to leave his own mark on the genre.
The reason I always loved the Wolfman movies was the metamorphosis. They did those series of lap dissolves, you know, and he'd sit still and get hairier and hairier until finally he would run around. I love that. One of the things I did when I made my movie was I wanted the Wolfman, the werewolf, to be much more literal. I didn't want it to be two-legged. I wanted him to turn into a wolf, a monstrous wolf. When I wrote it, I really wrote into it that the metamorphosis, the actual transformation, had to occur in bright light, with no cutaways, and on camera.
For An American Werewolf in London, Landis hired special effects whiz Rick Baker, who would go on to win the first Academy Award for Best Makeup.
John, he said, you know, it always seemed odd to him that when a person changed into a werewolf like the Wolfman did, you would sit down in a chair and prop yourself up in the corner so you could be really still until you transform into a werewolf, and then you would get up and move. You know, he thought if your body was going through these changes, you wouldn't be still at all. It would be incredibly painful, and you would be rolling around and screaming and doing all this kind of stuff.
The effects for that time were really, really groundbreaking. So when David Naughton is trying to sit there and ignore these urges, and then all of a sudden he just like tears his clothes off and begins this, for the time, very, very scary transformation, it's amazing. It's a mind-blowing film in that respect. American Werewolf was very hip. It was very scary. It was very gory.
And in the 2004 hit Van Helsing, the ancient beast got the 21st century treatment. A computer-generated transformation that would offer one of the most terrifying werewolf scenes ever filmed.
You're too late, my friend. My children live.
Then the only way to kill them is to kill you.
Got it.
So be it.
This cannot be.
Well, I guess that wicked werewolves and devilish dogs are here to stay. Thanks for the memory. Forget the Terminator. Get ready to call the Exterminator, because when Hollywood's Creepiest Creatures returns, we're going to be invaded by rats. Say cheese.
Hollywood's Creepiest Creatures is brought to you by Royal Caribbean. Get out there and take a Royal Caribbean cruise vacation.
You know, in some cultures, a rat is considered good luck. And sometimes, hot luck. Personally, I'm not so crazy about them. I mean, for one thing, they multiply like rats. You know, one reason they reproduce so fast is that they're able to complete the entire mating process in about 2 seconds. Maybe they just need more practice.
Rats. Rats. Millions of them.
They're indestructible. Rats are indestructible. Do you know they can collapse their skeletons and squeeze under a door? You know, and they're very smart, and they breed like crazy.
We've always heard if you see one, there's probably 1,000 lurking around that you don't see. And they've got some bad press, you know? There's that little bubonic plague thing.
Rats aren't always stars on the screen, but they sure do show up a lot in movies. And they're pretty much guaranteed to gross out an audience just by crawling around in some garbage and batting their beady eyes. In the television movie The Rats, Mädchen Amick tries to put the brakes on a massive rat infestation in New York City. In the film's climax, the little beasts are lured into an empty pool where Amick and her friends have a surprise in store. Oh my God.
This is working. A lot faster than I thought. Here, ladies out. We're going to send 8 of these around the pool. Space them evenly. We're going to wire them together and blow them all at once.
The plan works swimmingly. Almost.
Rats are one of the animals that people have had some good reason throughout history to be upset about. They were an important part of the Great Plagues, which decimated Europe during the Middle Ages. It wasn't the rats, but rather the fleas they carried that spread the contagion. But they've been always associated with pestilence and disease, and it's not always been an undeserved reputation.
Thanks to their association with spreading the bubonic plague, rats have become a big part of our mythology. The Pied Piper, one of the world's best-known fairy tales, and a Hollywood favorite, is based on the German legend of the Rattenfunger, who led all the plague-ridden rodents out of the town of Hamelin by playing his flute.
In the original silent Dracula film called Nosferatu, the vampire was presented as kind of a half-human, half-rat, with pointed ears and nasty little teeth in the front, and it's one of the most undying evocations of pestilence that has ever been seen on the screen.
This is Willard, and these are his friends, Ben and Socrates.
Half a century after Nosferatu, the classic creeper Willard gave a whole new meaning to the phrase rat pack.
He starts befriending these rats First they become his friends, then they become his tool of power, and all of a sudden he's this super confident person commanding an army of rats.
Willard takes good care of them, and they will do anything for Willard.
In the film, Bruce Davison played a social misfit who gets revenge on his enemies with a little help from his furry friends.
Well, it's got two things going on. It's a classic revenge story about, you know, the nerdy guy, the put-upon guy who exacts revenge. And it's also a nature amok movie where this disenfranchised character is able to create an army of rats to do his bidding. And the film was, you know, told very believably for the most part and convincingly. And the rats was scary.
My God, look at the rats. You made me hate myself. Well, I like myself now.
Where your nightmares end, Willard begins.
No, right! Look, no, right!
Willard is the one movie you should not see alone.
What is the world's most vicious animal? Lion? Tiger? Rhino? No, the most vicious animal in the world is a tiny one. No larger than that. The killer shrew.
Looks like a small rat.
The star of this 1950s creature feature, The Killer Shrews, wasn't exactly a rat, but a close, creepy relative.
Blood-curdling, horrifyingly poisonous monsters.
Was the livestock. The shrews got into the bombs.
The wildest of flesh eaters, threatening all mankind. Your flesh will crawl with fear at their nearness.
The shrews were out there. I couldn't take a chance.
And just in case we don't have enough reasons to be afraid of rats, Hollywood always comes through with its old standby. They might get really, really big.
Panther-sized rats hunting humans in packs. Now, American International Pictures brings this most incredible H.G. Wells science fiction classic to the screen, The Food of the Gods.
Food of the Gods is actually a terrible movie. I mean, just in the way it's made. You can almost see the peanut butter that they smeared on the little tiny model house to make the rats crawl all over it. But actually what's great about it is that it makes adults revert immediately back to little kid status, where when you're a child, because you're small physically, everything looks huge to you.
Just for the record, if you had any question about why it's best not to get caught up in the rat race, guess what happened to those rats in the swimming pool? I'll give you a hint. This climax is the bomb. When Hollywood's Creepiest Creatures returns, we'll get up close and personal with some fearsome felines.
Hollywood's Creepiest Creatures is brought to you by Talk to your veterinarian today about keeping your cat healthy with Revolution.
You know, Kitten, in some ancient cultures, cats were considered a symbol of fertility. But hey, once upon a time, so was I. And that ain't all we have in common. Cats are creatures of the night, and, like me, they spend more than 2/3 of their life sleeping. Hey, a girl's got to get her beauty rest. I just love kitty cats. Like I always say, just give me a tiger in the house and a jaguar in the driveway, and I'm happy. You know, there are 37 different species of cats around the world, from the North Pole to the rainforest, and most of them are perfectly sweet little critters. But, as it happens with a lot of us gals, somewhere along the line, cats developed a bad reputation. People started to think cats were downright demonic and witchy. I said witchy. a way about them that puts a lot of us on edge.
They're seen as creatures of the night, and that's all associated with darkness and nighttime and evil and witchcraft.
Cats were sacred to the Egyptians. There was a cat goddess named Bast. She was frequently pictured as a very large cat or as a woman with the head of a cat, and she was surrounded by cats. And she was a goddess of domesticity and fertility and sexuality. And in ancient Egypt, it was certainly sacrilege to mistreat a cat. You couldn't kill one, you couldn't harm one. And if one in your household died, the whole household may go into mourning and show it by shaving off the eyebrows.
But as it often happens, over time, symbols that once had positive meaning eventually came to be seen in a bad light. And cats haven't been able to shed their reputation for evil and cunning.
Black cats were associated with witchcraft in the Middle Ages. In fact, they were seen as witches' helpers because of their abilities to fall from great heights and land on their feet. So they were imputed as having these supernatural powers, and as a result, unfortunately, many of them were persecuted and abused and burned.
The fear of cats is a recognized phobia. It's called ailurophobia. And the first time we saw this in the movies was in the 1934 film The Black Cat with Boris Karloff and Bela Lugosi. Lugosi played a psychiatrist, of all things, who had a intense and all-consuming horror of cats, as Karloff said it, with his inimitable lisp. Of course, Edgar Allan Poe wrote his demonic short story on the subject back in the early 1800s, and the libel has stuck ever since.
I can't stand the way cats are always portrayed as the villain. I think it's easy for people to think of dogs as the innocent one, the good guy, the guy that wears his emotions on his sleeve. But with a cat, they don't necessarily show all their emotions and feelings. Since they are a little bit more complex, they are often cast as the diabolical, cunning villain or villainess.
Twice I've been followed by something that was not human, something that attempted to take my life. I believe that was the cat form of Irena.
Why should she wish to harm you?
Because I'm in love with her husband.
The horror classic Cat People managed to bring together every dark trait of fearsome feline.
Across the centuries comes this exciting story of a modern girl cursed by an ancient legend. The legend of the Cat People. Women whose kiss means death, whose love turns them into vicious, snarling beasts of prey.
Val Lewton's Cat People is one of the classiest horror movies ever made. A lot of it, the horror is left to the imagination. You're not sure if Simone in the film is really becoming a cat person, if it's all in her head, but there's some really good legitimate scares in the film. One of the characters goes for a swim in a pool, and you see shadows of what could be a cat on the wall, and the film really plays with our imagination.
In 1982, director Paul Schrader remade Cat People. This time, Nastasha Kinski played the gal who's horrified to learn she's descended from an ancient family of felines. When her libido is aroused, she becomes transformed into a snarling black panther. Now that's what I call a real sex kitten.
Cat People was a very interesting variation on the werewolf theme. In this transformation, woman turns into a very big, very murderous cat. She comes from a long line of cat people, and it's a strange metaphor for uncontrollable anger.
One film that took felinism and feminism to space-age heights was the sci-fi thriller Catwomen of the Moon.
Incidentally, where are your menfolk?
You're the first man I've ever seen.
You'll share man's greatest thrill as you rocket through space to the lost moon city of alluring, ferocious Catwomen. Theirs is the fevered fury of life without love, flaming into a wild lust to conquer man and destroy the world.
no feline femme fatale has made a more lasting impression than Batman's arch nemesis, Catwoman. On both the big screen and on television, Catwoman has always symbolized the most mysterious and dangerous side of our kittenish colleagues.
She can be as evil as she has to be at that time in order to survive. And she will devour you. But the good thing is that she doesn't devour you unless either she's absolutely hungry and she has to survive, or she feels she didn't deserve living.
Oh, you're going to see the perfect crime when I get Batman in my claws. When I was asked to audition, I licked my hand and did a lot of purring. And I remember Les Martinson, the director, saying, I didn't tell her to do any of that. And I said, oh, shouldn't I have? He said, no, that's fine.
Cats are sleek, cats are fast, and they think a lot. And they've always got some rascality up their sleeve.
Perfect.
Now, ask any mouse, or spider, or even a small bird, and they'll probably tell you cats definitely deserve some of that bad press they've gotten over the years. Those teeth and claws aren't just for scratching up your furniture. Even the cutest kitty can be a downright ruthless predator when she wants to be.
My cat killed a pigeon yesterday and toyed with it for 4 hours before she managed to completely do it in. So, yeah, I mean, if you watch a cat, you realize that they can never be fully domesticated.
He grows smaller, 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 and the terror mounts.
The Incredible Shrinking Man showed that a cuddly pussycat will turn against you on a dime, especially if you've shrunk to the size of a dime.
Don't worry, Butch. Everything's gonna be all right. Go to bed.
As the shrinking man gets smaller and smaller, he becomes a prisoner of his own house. And things like the family cat become terrifying menaces.
Maybe our fear of cats is part of their allure to us. But be careful. If a cat gets your tongue, she may just be getting started. Next up on Hollywood's Creepiest Creatures, we'll fly the unfriendly skies with a fiendish flock of deadly birds. So don't be chicken, darling.
Hollywood's Creepiest Creatures is brought to you by Sunny Delight. It's the good stuff kids go for.
You know, darling, I've always said that Hollywood is for the birds, and not just because everyone gets their feathers ruffled so easily. Now, usually we think of birds as beautiful creatures soaring gracefully across the sky, but every once in a while, the movies come up with some seriously freaky feathered fiends. These birds of a feather don't just flock together, they kill together. Take a gander at these little chickadees, and then you'll see what I mean. From time to time, Hollywood movie makers have tapped into our fear and fascination with birds. Even if the films are so bad, they occasionally lay an egg.
It's got one of the planes. It's coming after me.
Here's one bird of prey you'll pray doesn't fly by your town. In the 1957 movie, The Giant Claw, something that looks like an enormous prehistoric parrot terrorizes the earth.
The bird is extraterrestrial. Comes from outer space. From some godforsaken antimatter galaxy, millions and millions of light years from the Earth.
You know, the first movie I ever remember seeing was a movie called The Claw. Oh, and I saw a little bit of it recently on TV. It's kind of cheesy. It's not the big, but geez, it made a big impression on me back then. So The Claw was this big bird. the end of it, you know, they finally figure out, oh, we must kill bird with, they had a big sack, kind of like a big sack, and they shot the sack. And I remember the last sad kind of shot of this bird having been downed and kind of, ooh, the claw disappearing into the water.
There it is now, attacking the United Nations building.
Bird's after us, chasing us. How are you doing? For God's sake, hurry, man. It's catching up with us fast.
Bird attacks on humans are pretty rare, but that hasn't stopped Hollywood from exploiting our fears of danger from above. Maybe it's the mystery of flight, something we humans have been jealous of since the beginning of time. Or that magical ability birds have to appear out of nowhere and swoop down for the kill. But whatever the reason, we often get just a little bit nervous around our feathered friends.
Crows and ravens, often perceived to be interchangeable, are generally associated with death. In Celtic myth, you have the Morrigan, who is a goddess of death, hovering over battlefields and hanging around dead bodies of warriors.
Edgar Allan Poe's poem, The Raven, did nothing to improve the ominous image of the mysterious black birds. Over the years, the classic poem inspired two flights of cinematic fancy. A serious thriller starring horror heavies Bela Lugosi and Boris Karloff, and a tongue-in-cheek comedy starring Karloff, Vincent Price, Peter Lorre, and a young Jack Nicholson.
Well, don't just stand there. Do something.
Now, what is it you need?
You got some dried blood off of bats in the house?
To this day, we still associate ravens and crows with death and darkness. In Damien, Omen 2, when the journalist, played by Elizabeth Shepard, discovers the true identity of the 12-year-old devil child, she rises to the top of this bird's pecking order. But perhaps no film did more to make audiences fear everything from sparrows to seagulls than the mother hen of all feathered flicks, Alfred Hitchcock's 1963 thriller, The Birds. In one of the movie's most unforgettable scenes, a flock of crows inspires terror in actress Tippi Hedren and the audience, simply by quietly gathering on a playground jungle gym.
They're all just gathering behind her, just waiting for their moment. You can practically see the birds giggling, like, oh, just wait until she gets a load of us.
To this day, I'd say 9 out of 10 people who sees a flock of birds gathering on a telephone wire or on a jungle gym at the schoolyard immediately thinks of Alfred Hitchcock's classic film.
But birds don't generally have a scary connotation. So not only does Hitchcock take something that's all around us and previously wasn't scary, but he imbues them with malevolence. These birds are not just on a rampage, they're planning their attacks. They're very stealth.
Despite his impressive use of special effects, director Alfred Hitchcock decided some scenes demanded more realism. For the movie's climax, the script called for Tippi Hedren to be savagely attacked by birds in an attic.
And I said, Hitch, how is this going to be done? You know? and he said, oh, don't worry, we're going to use mechanical birds. The whole crew told me they were going to use mechanical birds. So why should I worry? I got onto the set the morning that we were going to do that. And Jim Brown, the assistant director, knocked on the door and he came in and he said, well, he couldn't look at me. He was looking at the floor, at the walls, at the ceiling. And I said, "What's wrong with you, Jim?" And he said, "The mechanical birds don't work. We have to use real ones." And out the door he went. Well, I blanched white.
Hitchcock planned to shoot that terrifying scene with real birds over the course of 5 grueling days.
I said, "Hitch, why? You know, I'm not necessarily a method actress, but I really need motivation for this. Why does she go up into this room? Why does she do that?" And he said, "Because I tell you to," which in other words is your paycheck, lady, you know. So we started the scene, and they tied the birds to me loosely so that the birds wouldn't be hurt. And midday Friday afternoon, one of the birds was sitting on my shoulder, and he jumped and he scratched me way too close to my eye, and at that point I had had enough of all of them, and I got them all off of me, and I just burst into exhausted tears.
As long as birds are flying, pecking, and clawing their way across the big screen, audiences will be flocking to see them. Just ahead on Hollywood's Creepiest Creatures, we'll go off the deep end and hook up with some of the most fiendish fish that ever wore fins. There you go, my little fish stick. Oh, don't worry, I didn't forget you. Boy, talk about having a lot of mouths to feed. From Bible stories like Jonah and the Whale to books like Jules Verne's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, the underwater world has been a source of some of the scariest tales ever told.
The ocean is the last remaining great physical unknown. Of course, we have so many narratives about the demonic deep. The Leviathan can come devour people. You have Jonah in the whale, and you have Pinocchio in the whale. It's the giver of life. It brings you food, but it also can take life. So it is the ultimate mysterious, ambivalent space on Earth.
Anybody who's been out in the ocean understands how open and vulnerable, you feel. It's a little frightening.
Whether it's an ocean or a lake or a pond or a toilet, it doesn't matter. People don't know what's down inside the water.
People go out in the water, they're at its surface, they're playing on the edge of it, but the ocean is a huge unknown area, and there are big animals with sharp teeth that live out there, and so that is enough to cause anyone fear.
A whale can stave in the ribs of the biggest ships, swallow whole crews, pick its teeth with the oars. Mind, lad, if God ever wanted to be a fish, he'd be a whale. Believe that, he'd be a whale.
Now, these days, most of us don't really think of whales as scary creatures. But long ago, these big, blubbery beasts struck terror in people's hearts, even if they'd never seen one. After all, whales could send a ship full of sailors down to Davy Jones' locker without thinking twice, as anyone who'd read Herman Melville's classic novel, Moby Dick, could tell you. In the 1956 film version, Gregory Peck plays the obsessed Captain Ahab, who'll stop at nothing to hunt down his archenemy, a deadly white whale.
You're to look for the white whale. The whale is white and as big as a mountain of snow. Oh, did you see him, men? Chase that white whale on both sides of land. And over all sides of earth. He spouts black blood and rolls dead out.
Of course, there's plenty of other fish in the sea. The shark is another relatively harmless sea creature that's gotten typecast as a tough guy in the movies. These fellas are pretty well adapted to their life as predators of the deep. They eat a lot of fish and occasionally take a bite out of a seal or a whale. The reality is we kill a whole lot more of them than they do of us. But try telling that to anyone who's seen Jaws.
There is a creature alive today who has survived millions of years of evolution without change, without passion, and without logic. It lives to kill. A mindless eating machine. It will attack and devour anything.
Steven Spielberg's 1975 blockbuster convinced a generation of moviegoers that it was not safe to go into the water.
I knew it would be a good adventure film. I never dreamed that it would, you know, skyrocket around the world. The one thing that nobody figured was how universal the fear of water is. I mean, I've always had a love of the beach and of the ocean, and I never swim very far out anyhow. Do I look around a little bit more than I used to? Yeah, I do.
You're gonna need a bigger boat. That's a 20-footer. 25.
The size of the shark, I think, is a little unrealistic. It's supposed to be just monstrous. And the intelligence of the shark, seeking people out, when it's got the boat and drawing them out to sea, it shows a pretty high level of intelligence and cunning. And you're not seeing that in the sharks. They're eating machines. They're out there looking for their prey. We're not their prey. From 1975 to 1995, there were many more people killed by vending machines falling on them than there have been by shark attacks in the United States. It is something that is a very, very low possibility of happening. Is it a possibility? Yes. Anything can happen, but if it does, it still would be an extremely rare event.
As if we didn't have enough scary sea creatures to worry about, in 1978, director Joe Dante gave us one more. Piranha. With their powerful jaws and razor-sharp teeth, piranhas snack on whatever's near. Other fish, birds, reptiles, small mammals. And they don't wait till their prey is dead to start chowing down. In a pinch, they'll even eat their own young. Of course, movies aren't about reality, and some of the stuff we see in films can be a little fishy. Take crabs, for example. They're kind of weird looking, and they walk funny. And if you've ever tried to pick one up, you know they can be a little, well, crabby. But check out what happens when nuclear fallout turns them into mutant giant shellfish. I like to call this movie Revenge of the Seafood Buffet. Wow, if only these guys had a large tub of cocktail sauce and a big bib, then they could eat dinner instead of be dinner. As it turns out, giant crabs weren't a one-movie phenomenon. Michael Craig was nearly crushed by a crustacean created by special effects whiz Ray Harryhausen in the sci-fi epic Mysterious Island. Now, the beach is usually a good place to relax, until something like this shows up in your cabana.
While teenagers prepare for a secluded slumber party, terror strikes from the bottom of the sea. An invasion of ghoulish atomic beasts who live off human blood. Again and again, the fiendish monsters struck like nothing that ever stalked this earth.
The creature from the Black Lagoon wasn't based on a real sea creature at all.
This creature was really a great-looking creature. I mean, he's based on a human form, but he's got this fish face, these long claws, these fins. They call him the gill man, and he's kind of like a piranha on steroids. He's very strong, he's very aggressive, he's very sleek-looking. He's a little alien, but he's also a little familiar.
Instead of just being a vicious predator, the creature came across as a tragic figure with a romantic soul. In the movie, members of a scientific expedition stumble across the prehistoric gill man along the Amazon basin.
It appeared to be human. I tell you, it's the greatest find yet. Nothing compares to it.
Grimly, men of daring venture into a dread world underwater, stalking a creature of frightening fury, a creature stirred to strange emotions by its first sight of a woman.
Creature from the Black Lagoon is a great film. Jack Arnold directed that, and it's a beautiful film. It's a King Kong story. It's Beauty and the Beast. He's perfectly happy in his Black Lagoon. We come in and put poison in the water. I mean, it's classic.
He is a rather repellent beast, but he does have a soft spot for the leading lady, and we feel a certain amount of pity for him at the end.
Get back, Katie, get back.
The creature would go down in history as the coolest sea monster in the movies. I guess something about that beast really touched a nerve with the audience. Even 50 years after he first emerged from the Black Lagoon, people can't get enough of him. Now, if you like calamari, and who doesn't, a giant squid just seems like more of a good thing. The giant squid has rarely been seen and never captured alive. Now, it may be shy, but it's not spineless. Well, actually, it is spineless, but it does have the guts to take on its main predator, the scary sperm whale. The squid usually loses. In Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, producer Irwin Allen's giant squid made a big splash in a scene that would go down as one of the most chilling underwater battles ever filmed. Hollywood classics to cheesy beach flicks, movie makers have had a whale of a time diving into the sea to go fishing for scares. When Hollywood's Creepiest Creatures returns, we'll meet some of the slimiest, scaliest, and most repulsive reptiles in show business. Outside of my ages, of course. Something that might surprise you. Do you know what many people are afraid of more than death, more than heights, more than using a public toilet? Snakes. That's right. But what is it about these slithery, scaly, cold-blooded, fork-tongued creatures that gives people the chills? Beats me. What do you think, honey?
There's a lot of animals out there, and a lot of them are really, truly dangerous. And I have worked with most of the most dangerous animals on the planet. I mean, I've spent a lot of time with leopards, packs of wolves, elephants. I mean, I'm not afraid of a spider or a lizard, a monitor lizard, but a snake. Any snake, I don't care how big or how small the snake is, it scares me. I'm afraid of snakes. I can't explain it. It gets worse as I get older. They creep me out more and more all the time. The thought of them gives me goosebumps. I just hate them.
Most folk speech about snakes is quite negative. You might say you're a cold-hearted snake, or you're a viper, or you're a snake in the grass. You also have, biblically, Aaron's rod turning into a serpent so that it can devour the rods of the other magicians of Pharaoh. So you do have positive associations, but mostly in Western culture, the snake is all bad because the devil or the big bad or the ultimate evil chose to take the form of a snake in the Garden of Eden and contributed to the downfall of humanity.
Snakes and reptiles are among the commonest phobias.
Rattlers. What a way to die.
unlike most phobias, there's a great deal of irrationality. People have a very visceral response to snakes, and I think this is because they're so unlike any other animal. They don't have arms or legs.
As with most phobias, our fears of snakes are pretty overblown. And as they say, they are more afraid of us than we are of them. From Raiders of the Lost Ark to Anaconda, from the Jungle Book to... Snakes have always had success in the movie business. Believe me, I've worked for a few myself.
Sudden, violent, horrible death. Can the dreaded curse of the Orang Sanko turn living woman into deadly, slithering snake? He, venomous, creeping evil, create a writhing hell on earth, the reptile.
Reptiles are more like dinosaurs than they are like human beings. So most of us can't really relate to them. And we don't give them human-like qualities.
Never in the history of the United States, a monster of such size and power and horrifying hatred of man.
They just seem kind of like monsters.
This slimy reptile, named Reptilicus, came from Sweden and ruined a lot of IKEA furniture before they finally killed him.
All units,
Now, everyone knows a lot of senior citizens live in Florida, and crocodiles and alligators are no exception. They're the descendants of the dinosaurs. A typical alligator mouth has 80 teeth, and they're not just there for smiling. A lot of the time, they eat their prey whole, but sometimes they use those powerful jaws to drag an antelope underwater, drown it, and chop it up for dinner. Sometimes it seems like the only thing as scary as being eaten by an animal is turning into one. The alligator people played on those fears, though not very realistically.
Inside this strange, forbidding plantation, on the edge of the death-laden bayous, there is a horror beyond belief. A scientist turns his cobalt rays on the revolting, scaly monarchs of the swamps to transform men into hideous, living gargoyles.
The Alligator People is one of the silliest animal amok movies. It was low-budget studio's answer to The Fly, and it has one of the silliest images of all the 50s monster movies of this guy wandering around with a giant alligator head on the top of his shoulders. Not too convincingly.
I'll kill you, alligator man!
The Alligator People was so outrageous, even the cast members had trouble taking it seriously. In the film, Beverly Garland discovers that her husband is the victim of a mysterious serum, which is slowly turning him into an alligator.
Paul, it doesn't make any difference. I'm your wife and I love you.
Now, we had one alligator head. So they said, what are we going to do? I have no idea what they've decided to do. I just know that when I opened the door, that there will be men walking, you know, in the kind of pajamas and slippers and in various stages of turning back into alligators. So I knock on the door, and the door opens, and I see these men walking down the thing, and they all look like they have urinals on their heads.
You're Mrs. Webster?
Yes. I broke up so bad. I had started to laugh, and they said, cut, Beverly, come on, we gotta go. I said, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Okay, got it. Knock, knock, open the door. I cannot tell you how ridiculous these people look.
Despite the giggles. Cast members, including Lon Chaney Jr., gave it their all.
No, you ain't him. You can't be him.
Now, snakes and alligators may have scaled the heights of Hollywood, but they aren't the biggest reptile celebrities in town. Whether giant monsters or dinosaurs, or some combination of both, like Japanese superstar Godzilla, big reptiles have made big bucks on the big screen. In the 1960 thriller, The Lost World, actors Claude Rains and Jill St. John shared the screen with some modern-day dinosaur descendants who got a chance to dress up as their prehistoric ancestors.
Battle of the Titans, to the death. The most terrible creatures of destruction that ever walked the earth.
It had a great cast and some lush photography, but their idea of dinosaurs was to take everyday lizards and reptiles and just stick rubber fins on them and shoot them up real close. And anybody watching the film realized that, hey, that's just an iguana and with some rubber on its back. That's not a dinosaur. So in that sense, it was never particularly convincing.
Whether it's a 15-story monster, a snake, or a lizard, reptiles sure have what it takes to make it in Hollywood. And hey, they always work for scale. Stick around as Hollywood's Creepiest Creatures returns for one more look at the beastliest beasts that ever clawed their way to the silver screen. Boy, talk about chewing up the scenery. Maybe movies are too tough on animals. Since most of the beasts walking the earth really aren't that harmful to us, is it fair to paint them as vicious killers just to bring in box office bucks?
There are more animals than there are human beings. We play with them, we see them flying, we see them swimming, and we eat them.
I've come to feel very close to the birds.
So of course we're going to tell lots and lots of stories about them. I think probably a lot of our folklore about animals, about insects, has to do with us and the way human beings perceive them, perceive ourselves.
No!
And are trying to work out our inner and outer world. We certainly tell stories about animals as a way to tell stories about ourselves.
I think evolutionarily we are probably hardwired to be afraid of certain animals. You know, rattlesnakes. I mean, why does that sound give us the creeps if you've never even experienced one? Spiders. We're also hardwired to be afraid of things we don't know or understand. I mean, like, why are bats so creepy? We just don't get them. They move weird, come out at night. Something like a shark. You know, I mean, just the thought of it's creepy. It could be swimming right under you and you have no idea it's there. So, yeah, I think it helps us stay alive.
You have to imagine that our early ancestors were running around trying to get food. And it's probably a good thing that we have some fears because we won't get eaten. You know, early man may have looked at a snake and said, what's this? And after a couple of them died, a couple of his friends said, oh, don't touch that, you know, or the spider that bites. These are all things that are kind of with us as humans over the years. So it's not altogether unhealthy.
All wild animals instill fear in people, and it's something that's going to bring up a gut reaction.
Creature features resonate with me and I think with most audiences because they're about everyday creatures, everyday animals, pets, creatures you see in the zoo turning malevolent and attacking their masters or their rulers on this planet. there's always a great what-if premise with movies like this. You know, what if Fido turned on his master? What happens if the birds all of a sudden attack humankind for all the abuses we've done to this planet? We've eaten them and caged them and abused them and tested cosmetics on them, and, you know, maybe man deserves a little comeuppance.
I have an affection for horror movies, creature features especially, because I grew up with them. I love monster movies based on giant dinosaurs. Mother Nature's revenge movies, things gone wild. Insect-related movies. Most kids have happy childhood memories of The Wizard of Oz or something like that. I have happy childhood memories of the birds.
One very consistent theme in horror entertainment has always been the eruption of repressed and primitive desires. And this is where the animal world comes in, and why the animal world figures so prominently in horror movies and in horror novels.
Thousands of rats.
It's the primitive shadow just kind of lurking back there, ready to jump out and say boo.
You'll be all right now. I know it's rats! Well, that's all we've got for you, my pets. Unfortunately, we didn't have time for some of my favorite animal movies: Raging Bull, Reservoir Dogs, Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, and, of course, Animal House. Well, we'll save those for next time. Now go feed your goldfish, walk your dog, and change that kitty litter. If you don't, you never know what kind of mischief those little beasts might be planning for you. So, until next time, unpleasant dreams.
Love, sex, and murder. Is it a sordid story ripped from a tabloid headline? A Shakespearean tragedy? No, it's the animal kingdom. Delve into the lives of spider serial killers, slave-making ants, and countless other freaks of nature as